But I want to look at the ABC now. We hate to see job losses anywhere, but wow, haven't we seen some job losses in this country over the past 6 months, and especially in the media. But we've seen a lot of focus on rather minor budget cuts at the taxpayer-funded ABC announced this week. Let's catch up with Daniel Wild from the Institute of Public Affairs to talk about this. Daniel, thanks for joining us. Look, this is a funding freeze for the ABC, but of course when you allow for inflation, that means over time perhaps it's a funding cut of 2%. Let's give them that. How many organisations, especially media organisations in this country, in the world at the moment, would kill to have to only be dealing with an efficiency of 2%?
That's right, Chris. Thousands and thousands would be begging for that kind of minor reduction to their funding, and it gets to a pretty big issue, I think, Chris, with what the ABC has been editorialising, and they've of course been one of the loudest proponents in favour of the most stringent lockdown measures. Now, there may very well be good arguments in favour of that. I happen to disagree, but they have been a chief cheerleader for the lockdown measures that have thrown hundreds of thousands of Australians out of their job. They've caused businesses to shut down. At this very point in time, we know that there's over 5 million Australians out of a workforce of 13 million. 5 million who are at the moment on unemployment benefits or are getting the JobKeeper wage subsidy, in addition to hundreds of thousands or more who have been had their hours cut and their wages cut. Now, it has been the productive private part of the economy that has disproportionately suffered, in particular small businesses, throughout the lockdown measures, whereas the ABC and other government-funded organisations have largely been shielded. And it gets to that broader dichotomy between the elites on the one hand and mainstream Australians on the other that have been doing it really tough. So I think, as you say, Chris, a lot of organisations will be begging for a 2% reduction to their funding.
I think it's terrible to see anyone lose their jobs, of course, but the ABC's got 250 jobs over 3 years. It's every likelihood it'll all be voluntary redundancies. I've got friends today doing their last day at the Australian. Most people in commercial media have seen so many people lose their jobs over recent months. And the ABC has been treating this as like the lead story. They've also almost been using their own broadcasting corporation to campaign against these budget cuts. And yet at the same time, 6,000 people are just wiped off the books at Qantas in a day. It seems a bad judgment on priorities.
Yeah, I think that's right. And on the one hand, they obviously have a commercial interest in that. They want to talk up their own issues to try and get more government funding, and they want to talk down what their competitors are doing. But it does really get to a broader issue, that is the ABC doesn't speak about mainstream issues anymore. We did a poll early in the year, Chris, that found that only 32% of Australians believe the ABC represents the views of ordinary Australians, and it's because of issues like this where there's a lot of constant navel-gazing that goes on. Instead, the ABC should be talking about the fact that we almost have 500,000 young Australians at the moment that aren't in work or on full-time employment, as in large part because of the lockdown measures, or the ABC engaging in relentless editorialising based on divisive identity politics, rather than talking about the things we have in common as a country. So they take the $1 billion a year and then they actually talk down to mainstream Australians, or they ignore their concerns, and that's why a lot of people are simply switching off the ABC and looking at alternatives.
Daniel, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks, Chris.
Daniel Wild there from the IPA. We'll have more on this issue on the Kenny on Media on Monday night.